Okay. So, a few final things to say about, the formula of humanity, before we turn to some challenges to it, just to talk about some ways of applying it, some open questions and how to apply it. So, you might be thinking, with all this talk of humanity, what would Kant say about intelligent aliens, if there are any? If you guys watch a lot of Star Trek, which I do, there's intelligent aliens all over Star Trek, right? Or, well, human actors with pointy ears, right? But let's imagine that someone like Mr. Spock from Star Trek were real, right? He's not a human being. He looks a lot like us, but he has green blood, different organs than we do. Everything's arranged all differently in Mr. Spock, right? Or if you guys have ever seen Arrival, really good movie. Um, the writer who wrote the story it's based on, Ted Chiang, is also just excellent. I'd recommend anything by him. But the aliens in that movie are really weird. They're weird seven-sided things with tentacles who float in this weird gas. Well, they're obviously not human beings, unlike Mr. Spock. They don't even look like us. Movie had a better budget, right? Mr. Spock is just like, well, put some ears on this guy. The old Star Trek, right? But what if there were aliens like that? You say, okay, they're not humans, obviously, by any definition of humanity. They don't have 46 chromosomes like we do. They don't look like us. They're not descended from, I forget, whatever creatures we're descended from. Not human beings by any possible definition of humans that you want to throw out there. So, since they're not human beings, can we just do whatever we want to them? Can we cut them up, hunt them for fun, whatever, because they're not human beings? Kant says, well, we have to respect humanity. What about intelligent aliens? Or what about, maybe a more real possibility? What about intelligent machines if we manage to create them? And again, I'm going to fall back on Star Trek. If you guys are really pedantic about this, Star Trek The Next Generation. There is an intelligent machine in Star Trek The Next Generation, Mr. Data, Lieutenant Commander Data, right? And, he's made up of silicon and metal and wires and positronic brain, which they never tell us quite how that works, but whatever. It somehow. Anyway, Mr. Data is very clearly a machine, and there's an episode of Star Trek where an admiral from the organization they work for, Starfleet, okay, just bear with me, it's getting real nerdy here, but whatever. All right, so this admiral from Starfleet, or it's not an admiral, it's some officer from Starfleet, has an order from an admiral, and he wants to disassemble Mr. Data to see how he works. He's like, yeah, we're going to disassemble you. I'm pretty sure I can put you back together in the right way. Pretty good odds. I want to disassemble you, right? Mr. Data, unsurprisingly, does not want to be disassembled. There's a whole episode called The Measure of a Man. Really good, episode of TV about whether it's okay to disassemble Mr. Data. Surprise, they conclude it's not. But what would Kant say? Would Kant say, okay, well, look, obviously Data's not a human being. He kind of looks like one, but you get beneath the surface, it's all wires, circuits, and whatever. He's not a human being. What's the problem? We can disassemble Mr. Data, right? Is that what Kant would say? Think about it for a second. Actually, absolutely not, right? Think about what's important for the formula of humanity. It's whether you have this ability to act for reasons and make choices about what are and aren't good reasons. In fact, the talk of formula of humanity is a bit misleading. And the statement, always treat human beings as ends in themselves and never as mere means, is also a bit misleading. What matters for Kant is rationality. And rationality defined, not as the ability to do math problems or whatever. It's the ability to evaluate reasons and choose what are and aren't good reasons for you. Mr. Data pretty clearly has that. It's right, look, We want to disassemble you. We will see how you work and maybe, be able to create more Mr. Datas. And Mr. Data's like, no, I don't think that's a good reason. I don't want to let you guys do that. No. Heard your offer. Hard no on that, right? Kant would say Mr. Data has the ability of rationality as much as we do. He deserves respect in the same way we do. The same goes for intelligent aliens, right? If they have this ability to choose what are and aren't good reasons for them, they would qualify. It would be wrong to use them as a mere means. All of which is to say, a more accurate way of putting the formula of humanity might be the formula of rationality or rational beings. And it would be always treat rational beings that have this ability to choose what are and aren't good reasons for them, as ends in themselves and never as mere means. Kant doesn't put it this way because, right, look, there were, nobody had even gotten close to something like AI in his days. This was 200 years ago, into the 1700s, beginning of the 1800s. Some people had thought about the possibility of AI. A lot of smart people out there. Nobody was even close. So the idea of intelligent robots, Kant doesn't think about. And aliens, Kant seems to have thought about this a few times, but obviously there are no Mr. Spocks or seven-legged aliens from Arrival walking around, so he doesn't really think he needs to account for it in his theory. We will just talk about humanity because humans are the only rational beings we're familiar with, right? Well, that brings us to the other side of this coin, right? What about human beings who aren't rational? Who don't have this ability or where it's severely impaired, right? Children. Elderly with severe dementia and the insane, right? Look, you might think, kids are, for me at least, maybe the clearest case, right? There's an old, if you guys ever read like the joke newspaper, The Onion, there's an old article, really funny, 100% of children opposed to children's health care, right? And it has like a picture of this sobbing kid. They're getting ready to give him a shot. There's a joke here, right? But I mean, think of it this way, right? Kids do not want to get shots. And medical care too, right? My poor son Daniel had for a while would get really bad ear infections, and he had an allergic reaction to one antibiotic, and it was really terrible. We'd have to give him injections to clear his ear infections. This hasn't happened in a while. The only antibiotic that would work was one you had to inject, and he hated it. You'd have to hold the poor little guy down and give him this shot, right? What would Kant say about that? Would he say, look, not rational, do whatever you want to kids? That seems really troubling. On the other hand, it also seems not terribly plausible to say that we should always respect children's choices, right? If my 2.5-year-old is saying, no, no shot, no shot, no shot, it breaks my heart. But doesn't seem like you have to respect his choice, right? What would Kant say about that? And what about, people who are insane, people who have severe delusions, who might be a threat to themselves and others? They might be making choices, deciding what are and aren't good reasons for them, but they might not be choices that seem like, to us, that deserve respect in the same way, because they might just be based on just completely weird reasoning or false facts, right? If someone has schizophrenia and they think that the FBI is out to get them, and so they need to do X, Y, and Z to stop the FBI and whoever else from spying on them, do we have to respect that reason? What would Kant say? Here's what Kant says about children. This might be the easiest case. Even very young children will eventually become rational beings. They are owed respect for that reason. There is no account of rationality that you can give where a newborn has it, right? Trust me, having fairly recent experience with a newborn, a lot of people call this, well, by a lot of people, I mean me and my wife and whoever she found online who called them this, but I think it's not uncommon. I call it the angry potato phase, right? They just sleep and they yell, right? They're very cute, they're very sweet, but newborns do not have reason. But Kant would say they'll develop this ability. And so you should respect them. You cannot just do whatever you want to them. You cannot treat them as mere means, because they will eventually develop the ability to reason. And there's also a blurry area, right? Most children have some capacity to decide what are and aren't good reasons for them, and we have to respect it. Children might not be able to evaluate, especially very young children, whether they should get a medical treatment or not. They can't step back enough and say, okay, me getting this shot, painful it is, it's better than, having my ears rupture, whatever, or having an infection go systematic. So maybe in those cases, what we would call paternalism, doing something against somebody's will for their own good, would be justifiable. They're not developed enough to really make choices and reason about these cases. But, in other cases, they definitely are, right? Even my 3-year-old, if I'm trying to get them dressed and he wants to wear a green shirt and red pants with different patterns on them, I can't just be, no, son, you look crazy. Let's get you something that looks matching. No, right? He has an ability to decide what clothes he wants to wear. If he insists on the one with the fire truck on it, he should get his fire truck shirt, right? I think Kant would say, children have some abilities to reason. Even a 3-year-old can decide within limits what he wants to wear. You have to respect that. Really hard with children, because it's just hard to draw this line. As they get older, they get more and more ability to make choices, act for reasons, more areas you have to respect them. How widely does that go? It's just a hard question. But they do have some abilities. And Kant will also say even the severely demented, elderly people who have late stage Alzheimer's, who have had, a progression of strokes. In fact, Kant, even these people were once rational, they're owed respect on the basis of that. In fact, I feel I should mention here, this is actually what happened to Kant. He had a very, very serious mental decline in the last year or two of his life. There's some debate on whether it was like a series of mini strokes or whether it was Alzheimer's. Obviously, we don't know, but that did happen to Kant. And Kant would say severely demented elderly people were once rational. They are owed respect on the basis of that. And like children, they still have some ability, most of them do at least, to choose what are and aren't good reasons for them. If a severely demented patient wants to leave the nursing home in like short sleeves in the middle of winter when it's 15 degrees outside and it's night, we might not have to respect that. But, if he tells you, I have been a vegetarian my whole life, I don't want to eat that meat, you can't be, no, Mr. Jones, you need protein. You're not, you don't have the ability to choose. He is still competent to decide, does he want to eat this or not, right? In most cases, and you have to respect that. And as with children, this is going to be a hard line to draw. In what areas are they still competent to make decisions and what not? Children will have an opposite trajectory. They'll get more and more able to do this. Elderly people with dementia of various sorts, other cognitive impairments, will unfortunately take the opposite track and get less and less able to do that. But both of them, children have some abilities that are further developing. Most demented elderly have some abilities that haven't gone yet. You have to try to respect that. Similar considerations hold for the insane. look, most of them were once rational, and most of them still have some abilities to choose what are and aren't good reasons for them. And in a lot of cases, with treatment, you know, people who are insane can recover the ability to make choices. You know, a lot of schizophrenics respond very, very well to antipsychotic drugs, right? People with bipolar disorder, they might not be rational if they're in the middle of a manic phase. Most respond very well to treatment. You have to take into account their ability to reason might be bettered or recovered if they were treated. That has to factor in your decision. But they were once rational, they might be again. For that reason, they deserve respect. Here we come to a hard one, though. What would Kantianism say about human beings who were never rational and never will be? We will talk more about this. We will delve more into it when we get into the abortion debate at the very end of the semester. I think Kantianism would just say they are not rational, never will be. I think that just Kantianism would just say they don't count. Kind of a hard thing to say, but for reasons we'll get into when we get into the abortion debate, it might not be. It is a hard thing to say. I don't want to deny that. It might not be ridiculous either. Final case, what about animals? Now, look, there's some debate about some animals, crows or elephants or, apes of various sort, whales, dolphins. There's a lot of animals that seem like they're really smart, and there's a debate to be had whether they have this ability to act for reasons, make choices or not. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. But I'm not somebody who works in the psychology of animals, so I don't know, right? But I think we can move away from this and say, look, there are definitely animals that don't have this ability, right? I love dogs. I love cats. They're both, I hate to say this, don't be mad at me. They're both pretty stupid, right? Dogs pretty clearly do not have an ability to step back from their desires, decide what are and aren't good reasons, and act, right? Dog sees a squirrel and he's like, squirrel, I'm off. Or food, I'm off, right? They do not have that ability. Domestic turkeys pretty clearly don't either, right? If you've ever been around a domestic turkey, they are the stupidest animals on God's earth, as a friend of mine used to put it. They are just dumb. I had a friend's mom who, as a hobby, would raise chickens, and she decided to get some domestic turkeys. And she told me, she's like, yeah, chickens aren't smart, but domestic turkeys make chickens look like the smartest creatures ever. They look like little, geniuses. What about animals like dogs, cats, domestic turkeys, cows, so on and so forth, that pretty clearly don't have this ability to act for reasons? I think Kant would just say they don't count. In fact, he does say they don't count. And this is a really interesting difference with the utilitarian, right? The utilitarian would say not only do they count for just as much as we do, right? Mr. Cow can feel pleasure. I guess if it's Mr. Bull, right? But whatever. Mr. Cow and Miss Bull can feel just as much pleasure or pain as we can. So can Schmuppers or Rex or whatever, dog or cat. They can feel pleasure, they can feel pain. They count for just as much as we do. That might seem odd to you, but on the other hand, Kant saying they don't count at all also seems weird. I don't know what to do with this. Even Kant is uncomfortable about this. He, in one of his works I'm not having you guys read, The Metaphysics of Morals, Kant's like, well, yeah, okay, animals don't count, so it's really not wrong to do whatever you want to animals, but also If you're cruel to animals, it tends to make you the kind of person where it's easier to be cruel to other human beings, and that's bad. So it's bad to be cruel to animals because it warps your character and makes it easier to harm human beings who do count. And I actually think Kant's right about that, that it does. Like if you watch these awful serial killer documentaries on A&E or whatever, which you might guess I have watched them, right? It'll be some awful moment where they're like, and young Ted started torturing the neighborhood animals, right? A lot of these guys do get their start doing that. It does seem to have a nasty effect on the human will, right? But I would also say, it seems to me the utilitarian's right over and above, you know, the fact it probably does bad things to your character, makes it easier for you to act immorally. It does just seem bad in and of itself to harm animals. I don't know. Utilitarians give animals a lot of moral standing. Kant gives them practically none. I don't know what to do with that. It's just a result of Kant's theory, though. You don't have to agree with it, but do know why and how Kant reaches this conclusion. All right. After this lecture, I want you guys to read this On a Supposed Right to Lie by Kant, which raises a real problem for Kant's moral theory that I think we need to talk about. In talking about it, I think it'll help us better understand what's going on in Kant. And then we'll wrap up this unit on Kant.